this leads me to the Sean Walker conversation. I think if nothing else, this guarantees. I never thought there was much of a chance. Maybe if Toronto's just like, nope, we need the toughness, we need the size. Give us Risto, we have to have him. I don't know how they fit him under the cap, but people get paid to manipulate that shit.
Whatever.
They figure it out. It's not my job. I never really thought it was a possibility, but there may have existed. All right, we traded Risto. We can keep Walker as our own rental. Whatever. All right, possible. I think this kills that now. Like Sean Walker is, if he was 99%, now he's 102% going to be traded.
So you really think so? See, because to me, I mean, my first thought when I saw this, and I don't think this is the case, but my first thought when I saw the Ristolainen stuff was this could be a justification for the Flyers to keep Walker, because you're looking at it and suddenly you could justify keeping Walker by saying we need another right side defenseman for the stretch run. He is now an own rental because now it's Sanheim, Drysdale, Walker, RR3. Without Risto, suddenly we need another right side defenseman. I still think he's going to get moved. But to me, this, the uncertainty surrounding Risto's status at least gives you a rhetorical justification for not trading him. So I was surprised that your response was, well, now there's a 100% chance Walker's getting traded.
I just figured it was definitely going to be one of them. And it was almost always certainly Walker.
Fair.
But it was definitely going to be one of them, and now you probably can't trade one of them.
That's fair.
So it's going to be the other.
Okay.
That's just what I think.
There's two ways to look at it, I guess.
They do have 8 defensemen and 3 other guys in the minors who could probably play.
Yeah.
At least some.
Yeah.
Someone's going to get traded, and it's going to be the guy probably with the expiring contract.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I'm working on a few diehard pieces for next week on the prospects. I do think that somebody like Ronnie Adder, they could justify calling him up if, say, they were to trade Sean Walker.
Okay.
And they might have Mark Stahl after deadline. They might not. I guess we'll see, depending upon if a team wants him. But he can play games. And then maybe you call up a defenseman like Adder and give him a go, or a defenseman like Emil Andre. They have guys that are pushing. So we'll see.
All right, and this leads me to the an interview I did earlier. We had a special guest join us for a pre-recorded interview. The great Rachel Doerrie of many jobs in the NHL. She wrote for The Athletic. She's been a video coach in the OHL, Hockey Canada. She is, I said she has a resume that makes me feel as if I've accomplished nothing in my life. And she joined us earlier, and we're going to play a little snippet of that in a second. Just to talk, I asked what she believes the proper compensation in a Sean Walker trade would be. She has a trade model that she ran his name through, and we're going to play that clip for you now.
Okay.
Now, you mentioned the trade deadline and trade value and everything, so just want to get your quick thoughts. You said it looks like the Flyers are selling. They've told us all along, like as much as I just want them to make the playoffs because I'm an idiot fan, they have the big picture in mind. They keep telling us, listen, we're sticking to the plan. It looks like certain guys are definitely going to be on their way out. Maybe Rasmus Ristolainen, not now. He might be out up to a month. But Sean Walker is the big name, and we've kind of been going back and forth on what exactly to expect in return for Sean Walker. Is like as a team like Toronto, who might be in the market for a defenseman, what do you think Sean Walker's actually worth at the trade deadline?
So I read him through the model as you were kind of talking about him. I did Ristolainen too, so I can help you out. But Sean Walker's comparisons right now: Alexander Carrier in Nashville. That's a pretty good comparison. Artem Zub in Ottawa. Connor Clifton, John Marino, and Matt Roy. So those are 5 guys where, Matt Roy could potentially be on the move as well. And so I think I look at that and I go, okay, he's playing second-ish, third pair minutes in Philadelphia. What does that look like? What does Toronto's right side look like? What do other contenders' right sides look like? Like, I think Edmonton could use Sean Walker probably the most. But I think when you're looking at that, Alex Carrier, I think, is probably the best comparison there because he's a guy that's also probably going to get moved at the deadline. So I think if those guys go for the same price point, you're probably in a good spot there in terms of value. So that's sort of what I would look at. And I think it's pretty unreasonable to expect that, yes, he is right-handed, but at the end of the day, like the guys I just named off, like, are those first-round pick caliber players? Like, no, they're not. And so I think you look at that, and if you say you can get like a a prospect that fits Philly's kind of timeline. So let's say it's a trade with the Leafs. If you can get a Pontus Holmberg, Nick Robertson, somebody of that age that has proven they can play NHL minutes, but isn't like a star. Like you're not getting Matthew Nyes for Sean Walker kind of thing, right? And so I think if you can get a player that has shown that they can play, or like a second round pick, it's probably fair value.
Yeah, I think like maybe if a team just gets stupid and says we have to have this guy, they could extract something extra, but something around that second round, maybe a young prospect who isn't, like you said, a star. That's what we should expect. Just trying to temper expectations here.
Yeah, I think if you look at Edmonton, right? Right off the top of my head, obviously Philip Broberg comes to mind. You're going to have to take money back, so maybe it's a Warren Fogle that comes back the other way as well. But you got Philip Broberg, Xavier Bourgault. Raphael Lavoie is actually somebody who I think would be a great Philadelphia Flyer. But yeah, you're looking at a middle of the pack kind of prospect. Like when you're trading, you can't be expecting a Michkov level prospect coming back for a third pairing defenseman. Like that's just straight up not feasible.
So that was Rachel Doerrie in our conversation earlier today. The full interview will be up on our YouTube page after today's show at some point. I don't know how these things work, but Brent is all over it. So, Charlie, I just wanted to ask, what did you think of the player comparisons Rachel made, and what do you think would be fair compensation based on what she said for Sean Walker? One of those prospects interest you at all?
No, I think that's fair, and I believe we talked about this after the game.
Yeah,
I forget which show it was, but a recent show you brought up the Walker conversation. Mm-hmm. We do so many shows; it's hard for me to keep track of which show I talked about it on. But I am getting the sense that if they get a first-round pick for Walker, it's going to be because, in terms of market value, another team panicked and overpaid. Doesn't mean it can't happen. It just means that it's not like Walker is a guy that teams are convinced is worth a first, and it just comes down to which team is willing to pay up. Mm-hmm. It would be an overpay. Again, could happen, but it would be an overpay. I am more thinking now that if Walker is traded, and I do think he ultimately will be traded, it's going to be something of like a second-round pick plus a prospect, something like that. Now, I don't know. Nick Robertson's a guy that's interesting to me. He actually came up in our Discord last week. I haven't watched much of him over the last couple years. I remember being intrigued by him as a prospect. I remember watching him in that bubble, and he looked interesting. He obviously hasn't found a way to stick in Toronto. Also, he's an undersized winger, and the Flyers have quite a few undersized wingers that are already part of this. So I just don't know if he quite fits an organizational need at the moment. Like, look, we think Matvei Michkov is going to be a superstar. He's also an undersized winger as well. Like, they have a lot of guys. Konechny probably going to get re-signed, I would guess, at least. It seems like things are going in that direction. Bobby Brink's an undersized winger. Sam Tuamala isn't the biggest guy. They have a lot of guys who are small on the wing. They have some bigger guys. Guys like Owen Tippett, Tyson Forrester bring size. I just don't know how excited they would be to bring in a Nick Robertson who might be a little stylistically redundant with the guys that they already have. Maybe there's another guy out there. Philip Broberg, she brought him up. Look, I've never liked Philip Broberg.
His name has come up a lot.
Dating back to his draft year, I have never been sold on his hockey sense. That said, the raw tools are good. They've always been good. I remember that my knowledge of Philip Broberg was I heard rumors leading up to the draft that he got taken in that the Flyers liked him, and I was crossing my fingers they didn't take him because I didn't like him. That's my memory of Philip Broberg. I haven't watched a ton of him since that draft, but that's still my bias. My bias is that I don't think he has the hockey sense to be anything more than a decent third-pair defenseman. However, if there's one coaching staff that could potentially mold a guy with really good raw tools on the back end to be more than that, maybe it's Bradshaw on the Flyers. So wouldn't rule that out as as a concept. It's just he's not a guy that personally gets me excited because I've never particularly liked him when I watched him play.
I know very little about him, and if the Flyers trade for him, I will be a big fan. And just getting back to Sean Walker for a second, like a lot of us got really excited by the start of the season he had just in terms of the points totals, and it was like, well, he's definitely going to get a first-round pick. He had 10 points in his first 18 games. In the 36 games since then, he has 9 points. He was playing 21 minutes a game back then. He's down to 18 and a half these last 36 games. So, like, just the numbers that get you a little excited, and obviously the scouts who are watching it, like, there's a better understanding of like exactly how to utilize him and what he's worth. But just the raw statistics are not what they were to start the season, and that's why I think he's definitely getting a first round pick. Suddenly, we're tempering expectations a little bit, maybe.
About Walker?
Yeah, about what to get back for Walker.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
You know, some people can look at Walker and his underlying number is still very good. The one thing you do have to remember with Sean Walker, and this is something that teams will look at, especially in terms of the role he's going to play, but not even that. In terms of the role he's played in Philly, we can look at Sean Walker and say, yeah, you know, this guy has been used as a second pair defenseman. He's still getting under 20 minutes a night with the Flyers.
Yeah.
The guys who tend to bring back a larger draft pick package at the deadline than you think, if we're talking about defensemen, are guys that take on big minutes for their team. Like somebody in the comment section, I believe, just put David Savard in there. David Savard got a lot of minutes on his teams, and that served to increase his trade value. Teams will look at Sean Walker and say, this is a guy who's getting 19-27 for the Flyers right now, has never gotten over 20 minutes once in his career. Compare that to somebody like Savard, who, and I'm pulling up his numbers now, I guarantee you he had multiple seasons where he got over 20 minutes a night. And that's the sort of thing that's important. It's important to teams that are looking to make, like you're looking at Savard, 22-57, 23-10, 21-50, 20-41. This is what he was getting in Columbus. Then he got 20 minutes a night with Montreal. He got 20 minutes a night with Tampa Bay. Like, these are things that teams care about. And Sean Walker has never been a workhorse, even with the Flyers. He's getting his most minutes of his career. He's still not really a workhorse in the same way that even Ristolainen was in Buffalo. It was one of the reasons why Ristolainen had such trade value, because it was the idea that, well, he can take on a ton of minutes if we have to. If we get a 3 overtime game, he can be a workhorse. I don't think Walker is the type of defenseman in terms of style and in terms of track record that teams tend to overpay for at the deadline. Again, not saying it can't happen. The right shot thing does help. I just don't necessarily see him as a guy who a team is going to convince themselves they need to give up a first-round pick for.
It's just, I realize there is a shortage, and I'm about to do the mortgage CS read and like do a whole thing about supply and demand. I get that there is a shortage of right-handed defensemen, and that makes them more valuable. It just makes me laugh every time. It's like, well, you know, he is right-handed. Like, so 90% of the population. I get that. Hockey, it's different.
Yeah, it flips.
Because most of these guys, they didn't grow up in America. If you grew up in Canada, you probably play backwards.
Yeah.
And most of them are Canadian. So
there's that.
It makes me laugh when we say these things.
We all silly like the mayor.